Yes, before we get into the Gemara, so you know, of course, that today is the 12th of Tammuz, which is the birthday of the previous Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson in 1880, Tafresh Pei. Sorry, in 5680, Tafresh Pei. I believe that's right, which is, does that make sense? 1880? No, not 1880, it's earlier. Okay, I'm mixing up the date. Pretty sure it's Tafresh Pei. Yeah, it's 1880, which is, it's 1880. It's not Tafresh Pei. 1880 would be tough. 1880 would be, what would be the Hebrew date for 1880? It's tough. Reish Mem 5640, right? Anyways, that's his birthday. And then in 1927, so he's now how old? 1880 to 27, he's 47 years old. That's when he was liberated after being imprisoned.
Which Rabbi is this?
Previous Chabad Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. So in 1927, he was freed from Russian Soviet imprisonment. Of course, it's communist Russia, so he's being imprisoned for his quote-unquote counter-revolutionary activities in keeping Judaism alive.
So he's freed on his birthday.
That's correct. This makes it such a special day. So it's, of course, a day celebrated in Chabad. It's a day of personal liberation for the Rebbe, as you heard in today's Yom, by extension for all Jews as well. And that he embodied the continuity of Judaism. It wasn't just he himself that was willing to sacrifice and risk his life for keeping Judaism alive, but he inspired his followers as well. Inspired others. And he had a whole network of underground yeshivas and schools and mikvahs and all that to keeping it alive during communist Russia. In fact, my wife's grandfather sat in jail for 3 years. Yep, sat in Russian jail for 3 years. It wasn't like it wasn't special. Many like him did the same. Others who got shot, others sent to Siberia never to return for being part of the previous service network of keeping Judaism alive. I once asked my wife's grandfather if he ever met the previous Rebbe. He laughed at me. He's like, when was he supposed to meet him? During communist Russia, it wasn't as if the previous Rebbe was walking around publicly meeting people. It's super high risk. He never met the previous Rebbe, and yet willing to put his life on the line for the work that he had inspired. Never met the previous Rebbe. He had one contact man in his town, and he informed him that you need to go to X place. So he went. He got arrested. That was it. That's the level these guys were living at. That's kind of like these people are living. Complete full dedication and self-sacrifice, the preservation of Yiddishkeit. So I'm just going to share one story, my favorite story during this whole episode with the previous Rebbe. So, sorry?
No, sorry.
The previous Rebbe kept a very detailed journal. The previous Rebbe is a beautiful writer. Lots of stuff been translated into English. In general, Chabad history to a large degree is preserved by the previous Rebbe. Stories he had heard from his grandmother, from older Hasidim he had wrote down.
In English?
He wrote them originally in Yiddish, but many of them are available in English. The story of his arrest and then his eventual liberation is a book in English called The Heroic Struggle. Fascinating book. And recently, could be translated. Oh, that's very nice. He translated it, right? Recently, Kahas, which is the Chabad publishing house, publishing a series called Biographical Sketches or Historical Sketches. It's a series of like little books, each 150, maybe 200 pages, that are taken from the previous Rebbe's diary and creating like kind of profiles on different people. The most recent one is about his grandmother, from whom he heard most of these stories. Anyway, she's very like I don't want to say poetic, but very literary is not the right word either. But if you were to read classic literature, this previous Rebbe's writing is on that level. Very beautiful, very tugs at the heart, tugs at the soul, transports you into the place that he's writing about. It's very beautiful writing.
I think you mentioned like the special style.
Yeah, even his discourses in philosophy and Chassidus also have a certain style. There's a sort of artistic style to it, if you will. There's a certain art to it, especially his writing in which he describes his journal or describes events and people. Very beautiful. Anyway, so he relates the following story, that at one point, during he was arrested, the final arrest, right, where he was sentenced to death, and then commuted to 3 years in exile, and then commuted further to be kicked out of Russia, essentially kicked out. And he went from there to Poland, and then 10 years later, when the Second World War broke out to America. But prior to his arrest, he had been taken in for interrogation a number of times. And one of the times he was interrogated, so there's a number of interrogators sitting around at a table facing him, and he wasn't cooperating, as was his way. He didn't cooperate because he wasn't going to give an inch. Nothing. So at one point, one of the interrogators takes out a gun. I'm sure I've told you the story. Heard the story from me? Yeah. Yes, I just want to share a story and make a point out a important lesson from the story. So they took out a gun, they put the gun on the table, and they said, Rabbi, this toy makes lots of people talk. Yeah, intention being obvious. So the previous service said that only works if you have many gods in one world, then you're afraid of that toy. But I have one God in two worlds. I'm not afraid of that toy. The simple meaning of what he means is that I'm not scared to die. I have the same God in this world and I have the next world. If I die here, I live on the next world, so I don't have a body anymore. So what? I have one God. I'm not afraid to die. I live on in the next world, so I'm not afraid to die. That's simply what he's saying. If I have two worlds and one God, that toy doesn't scare me. And that's it. He's not scared of the toy, not scared of the gun. But before he says that, he says that it only works if you have many gods in one world. So what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that they had many gods in one world? The communists were atheists. They didn't believe in any God. So what do you mean by saying that the gun works if you have many gods in one world? Well, he said about himself that I have one God in two worlds, and that's why I'm not afraid. That's clear. I have one God, and the same God is in this world as in the next world, and if I die, I go to the next world, so what? That's clear. But what did he mean when he said first that you guys have many gods in one world? What does he mean? They don't have any gods. They're atheists. Communists are staunch atheists. So perhaps what he meant is, I'm sure I've shared this with you before. No?
I don't think I heard this part of it.
Yeah. So this is my commentary on the story. Perhaps what he meant is that people have one world. Who's their world? Themselves. And then in their own world, they have multiple gods. Money is one God. Fashion is another. Social status is another. Exercising their body is another God. This is another God they're enslaved to. The Facebook or Instagram algorithms, all kinds of gods people have that they worship, all for the one world. If that's how you live, the way you live is that you have one world yourself, and everything, and you have all these gods you got to worship. You have to worship Hollywood, got to worship media, worship money, social status, 1,000 things you're worshiping. If that's your world, and a gun is very scary, because in 1 second, your entire world and all your gods die. In 1 second. But if you have two worlds and one God, so perhaps it means not just this world and the world to come, but even not right now, you have more than one world. If your family life, your public life, business, all different worlds you have. But you have one God in all these worlds. And all the worlds you have, whatever you're involved in, you only have one God. Right? This is Hashem Echad, one God. When we say oneness of Hashem, we don't just mean one God, not another, but that everything is permeated with God. That's the truth of the oneness of Hashem. So on a personal level, that's what this means. I have one God in everything. Whatever world I'm in, I still have one and the same God. If that's how I live, guns don't scare me. I don't know why should I be scared?
Everything.
Whatever the reality is, this is what Hashem wants. This is godliness.
Providence.
Sorry?
Providence.
That's right. And I'm freed.
It's
correct. And I'm completely freed from all the gods you're worshiping, all the pharaohs that have turned themselves into gods. The pharaoh of the credit card, the pharaoh of the telephone, all the pharaohs and the gods that we create, they're gone. If you have one God, you're free from all of this business. So it's a very powerful lesson. You don't have to have the communists point a gun at you. We all know in our own personal lives the various different gods that are very attractive gods, and they promise great reward if you should worship them. Yeah, if you worship fashion, you'll get who knows what. If you worship money, you'll get who knows what. And if you worship Hollywood, you'll get who knows what. All these very attractive gods that promise all kinds of rewards, and they're very enticing. And we have to remember, no matter how many worlds there is, we have one God. And with that, you're freed from all this business and all this garbage, and you're completely fearless in life. Not afraid of guns, not afraid of anything, not afraid of anything. Anyways, that's just something to think about in this auspicious day. Okay, to the Gemara. So we have discussed Moshe Rabbeinu being saved from the Nile by the daughter of Pharaoh, by Patya, who brought him in. And yesterday we discussed the relationship there to the water that eventually was Moshe Rabbeinu's quote-unquote blunder, his so to speak mistake, whatever that means for a tzaddik, whatever that means for someone like Moshe Rabbeinu. But that's what the what's the word? The stargazers of Pharaoh saw. They saw that their leader, the Jewish people, would be afflicted by water, and they assumed that meant drowning. And it's a mistake. What they were really seeing is Moshe Rabbeinu being afflicted by eventual hitting the rock rather than talking to the rock. Eventually, when Moshe Rabbeinu is floating in the water, that element which told them that the leader of the Jewish people would be afflicted by water disappeared, because Moshe Rabbeinu was in fact in the water. So they assumed that the leader of the Jewish people drowned, and therefore they called off the decree. And in the meantime, Moshe survives being raised by Batya. This is where we are in the narrative. So the Gemara stops to give us a little calendar talking. Tell us where we are in the calendar when this is going on. But before that, good morning, Alan. Good morning, Alan. So
Morning.
Good morning. So before that, the Gemara tells us, where are we? The Gemara tells us on the date about when this happened. When Moshe Rabbeinu was saved by Batya from drowning in the water. The Gemara says as follows. It's Yud Beis Amud Beis 12b. Rabbi Chanina of our Papa Omer. Rabbi Chanina, son of Papa, says the line starts the word Shvili Nitzaltem. You have it. So Amar, he says, Oisi Hayoim, that day, Esim ve'echad b'Nisan, was the 21st day of the month of Nisan. In the middle of what will become Pesach, right? Pesach hasn't happened yet because Pesach celebrates the exodus from Egypt. This is, of course, before the exodus from Egypt, 80 years before. But this is 21st of Nisan. So the Gemara explains how it got to this conclusion.
What was the day Moshe was saved by Batya?
Sorry?
What was the day?
Yes, the day was saved by Batya. So this explains the logic. So the angels told God while Moshe Rabbeinu is floating in the river, the master of the universe, the one who is eventually going to say Shira Alayam, the one who is eventually going to say praise, sing the song, the Az Yashar, the famous song, on the sea. On this day, should be taken out on this day, should be afflicted on this day by water. So in other words, the angels are making a connection between the day that he's floating in the river to something that happens later on in his life. So what, according to Rabbi Papa, the association the angels are making is between his thanking God for saving him from the water. And they say the day that he's eventually going to thank God, sing your praise, God, for saving you from the water, from splitting the sea. That's the day which he's going to be taken out by water, which means whatever day the Jews came out at the sea is the same day that he was taken out of the river by Batya. And of course, the day that they were split, that they sang the Shira, they sang the song at the sea, when the sea split, is the 21st of Nisan, right? The last day of Pesach, right? Right? And Rashi goes through, quoting from a book called Seder Olam, exactly how we know that it was the 7 days after they left Egypt. That's when the sea split. It was exactly 7 days later, which of course is the last days of Pesach. So this is Rabbi Chanina bar Papa's opinion that the angels' association between the day and the life of Moshe later, which parallels the day now, is the day of the splitting of the sea, and therefore just like the splitting of the sea is 21st of Sivan, so is the day 21st of Nisan. I'm sorry. So is the day that he's taken out of the river is 21st of Nisan. This is Rabbi Chanina bar Papa's name. Chanina bar Papa's opinion. Rabbi Acha bar Chanina Omar, he says, on that day, Shisha b'Sivan Haya was the 6th of Sivan.
Wait, who was the opinion that moment?
Chanina bar Papa, and this is Acha bar Chanina. So Rabbi Acha bar Chanina is of the view that the day he was taken out, the day he was saved from floating in the Nile, from floating in the river, was the 6th of Sivan. And of course, the 6th of Sivan is a significant day later in Moshe Rabbeinu's life. Namely, the angel said to God, the master of the universe, the one who will eventually accept the Torah at Sinai, on this day, should he be taken out on this day? So we know that the angels made an association. They've completed to God to let Moshe Rabbeinu should be saved from the river. They made an association that something's going to happen later on in his life on this day. And they dispute as to what exactly later on is. Either this day is going to be a special day in his life. But which one is it? Is it the splitting of the sea? That would be Rabbi Chanina's opinion, and therefore it must have been the 21st of Nisan. Or is the eventual event going to be the 6th of Sivan, which is when the Torah was given? Now, the water association is clear when we compare Moshe Rabbeinu in the river and Moshe Rabbeinu splitting the sea. So they're both water. But the receiving of the Torah is also connected to water. Because Torah is compared to water. The Torah is compared to water. And one of the ways in which Torah is compared to water, this is what Chassidus says. Tanya says this. How is Torah compared to water? In the same way, water seeks out the lowest point. Water starts off at the highest location. Rain comes from the heavens, and it seeks the lowest realm. And as it descends into the lowest realm, it still retains its nature as water. It doesn't morph and become less. It's the same water. It just looks for the lowest location. And the same thing is true of Torah. Torah is the loftiest idea, the loftiest thing that possibly exists. It's God's ideas, God's desires. You cannot get loftier than that. It's God's desire, God's will. It's the blueprint for creation. It's the one with Hashem himself. And yet Torah descends to the lowest of realms, contending with people who lie. Torah law deals with people who lie about the most mundane and sometimes even obscene things. And even there, when Torah deals with people who are lying and cheating and doing all kinds of terrible things, we learn the Gemara laws related to who knows what. I mean, we've had discussions on stuff you wouldn't imagine the Gemara talks, but it talks about it. And even there, as it descends into the lowest of places, it still remains Torah.
Torah teaches you what.
That's correct. So,
what not to do. That's what it's meant.
Exactly. No, but you could think of a religious text in other cultures. A religious text is a spiritual text, so it kind of stays away from all this. Doesn't get into the mud of human existence. It's a spiritual text often, and tells the person to try to transcend. Torah doesn't do that. Torah gets into the lowest details of how you should behave in intimacy and what happens here and what happens here. Torah gets into the nitty gritty of a person's life. Don't steal, don't kill. And then as you get into the laws, it gets very, very detailed into very, very specifics of a person's life, because that's what Torah is. It's like water. It starts at the highest location. It's God's desire, and it remains God's desire even as it descends to the lowest place. All to say,
Maybe,
yes?
how do we know what the angels said to God? How do they find that out?
I assume they have it by tradition. It must be a tradition passed down from back to Moshe Rabbeinu. So in this instance, I'm guessing that the tradition is that the angels pleaded to God that Moshe should be saved because something in his life later happens on this day. And the dispute here is, what is that later item? Is the later item this splitting the sea, or is the later item the giving of the Torah? But I assume because of the, in other words, I'm looking at, I see two opinions. So I'm looking at the commonality, and the commonality must be the tradition. And then they're arguing exactly the details of this tradition.
The angels didn't want to give the Torah to the lower realms, so maybe it's the other thing.
We don't get to vote on which opinion in the Gemara. Okay, how you reconcile that is a good question. How you reconcile that is a good question. How you reconcile the fact that the angels didn't want to give the Torah versus the angels defending Moshe Rabbeinu? That's a good question. But either way, I'm just assuming that because there's two opinions here, so look at the common theme. They both agree that the angels defended Moshe Rabbeinu, and B, the defense is that later in his life something's going to happen on this day. So that must be the core of the tradition. And then the dispute is, what exactly is this event that happens later in his life? Is it the splitting of the sea, or is it the giving of the Torah? And I'm just commenting that the splitting of the sea is clearly a relation to water. He's in water, and later on he's going to be splitting the sea, which is obviously related to water. And I'm adding that Torah is also connected. So the giving of the Torah as a date on which he was saved from the water years earlier is also connected, because Torah itself is compared to water, and I just explained how. Okay. Now the Gemara goes further. So Bishlema, let's before we do this, we know by tradition. Actually, the Gemara works out, and the Gemara in Kiddushin, Rashi tells us, works out Moshe Rabbeinu's birthday. His birthday is the 7th of Adar. How did we come to the 7th of Adar? Because the verse tells us that the Jews crossed the Jordan on the 10th of Nisan. And the verse tells us, so work backwards. The verse tells us that the Jews crossed the Jordan at the 10th of Nisan. And we also know that Moshe Rabbeinu died 33 days before the Jews crossed the Jordan. How did we get to 33 days? Because the verse tells us that the Jews mourned Moshe for 30 days. And it says it took them 3 days after the mourning to get into the land. It says in 3 days from now, after they mourned Moshe, the verse says, in 3 days you will cross the Jordan. So we have 30 days of mourning, 3 days till they cross the Jordan, and then that's the 10th of Nisan. So you have to take the 10th of Nisan, work back 33 days, and you know when Moshe Rabbeinu's passing is. So 33 days before the 10th of Nisan is, of course, the 7th of Adar. Adar is the month preceding Nisan, 30 days in a month. So the 10th of Nisan, 30 days before would be the 10th of Adar, and minus 3 days is the 7th of Adar. So we know he passed away the 7th of Adar. And we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was born on the same day he passed away. How is that? Because when Moshe Rabbeinu delivers his sermon, he says, I am today 120. So we indicate that today, the day he dies, he turned 120. So we figure out when he passed away, 33 days before the 10th of Nisan, which is the 7th of Adar. And we know that he's born the same day he passed away. So we know he's born the 7th of Adar. Okay, let's keep that in mind. He's born the 7th of Adar. And we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was put in the basket 3 months after his birth. Right? We said this earlier because, right, remember we said this, that Moshe Rabbeinu's parents, that's right, Moshe Rabbeinu's mother got pregnant, she conceived from the first marriage, then she divorced, then they remarried, right? And the Egyptians only came 9 months after they remarried, which was 3 months after Moshe Rabbeinu was born, because really he was conceived in the preceding marriage. So now we have to take these two elements together. Moshe Rabbeinu was born the 7th of Adar. 3 months later, he is in the basket. So whatever date you're going to give to the day that Batya saves Moshe has to be 3 months after the 7th of Adar. So now let's take that in mind and look at the two opinions. Was it the 6th of Sivan or 21st of Nisan? And let's see how we can get to 3 months. And that's what the Gemara is doing right now. We clear?
Yeah.
So says the Gemara. Bishlema, this is all well. Lamanda Amar, according to the opinion which says the Shisha B'Sivan, that the day Moshe Rabbeinu was saved by Batya from floating in the river, is the 6th of Sivan. So Mashkachasla, it works out Gimel Yarchi, 7 months. The Amar Mar, because we learned in the Gemara and Kedushin that she explained, B'Shiva B'Adar Meis, that Moshe Rabbeinu died on the seventh day of Nisan, or seventh day of Adar, which was Shiva Adar Noilad, and the same day, the seventh of Adar, he was born. Moshe was born. So now let's count.
How do we know he was born on the same day? There's something.
Because Moshe Rabbeinu says, today I turned 120. On the day he dies, he says to the people, today I'm 120. So it's his birthday. He died on his birthday. Okay, so now let's count. So he's born the 7th of Adar, and he was saved in the river on the 6th of Sivan. So you have 3 months.
3 months after?
Shiva, well, let's count. Shiva Adar goes to 7th of Nisan. That's 1 month. 7th of Iyar is 2 months.
Unless there's a leap year.
7th of 7th of Sivan is a 3rd month. 6th of Sivan, it's almost exactly 3 months minus 1 day. So Mashiv Adar, Ba'achish B'Sivan, from the 7th of Adar to the 6th of Sivan, Tlasa Yarche is 3 months. So it works out perfectly.
Works out.
7th of Adar to the 7th of Nisan to Iyar to Sivan. But according to the opinion which said that Moshe Rabbeinu was saved by Batcha from the basket on the 21st of Nisan, how does it work out that you have 3 months? You don't. The 7th of Adar to the 7th of Nisan is 1 month, and then 7th of Nisan to 21st of Nisan is how many days? 7 to 21 is how many days? 14 days. So it's not even a month and a half. It's exactly a month and a half. But we said it had to be 3 months. So what do we do?
It's a month and a half.
7th of Adar to the 7th of Nisan, plus the 21st of Nisan. It's a month and a half. We needed to be, and we understand, we learned before that Moshe Rabbeinu was floating in the basket 3 months after his birth. So how do we get to 3 months?
Was he floating 3 months?
No, on the 3rd month he was put into the basket, right? He wasn't floating 3 months straight, but they hid him, right? They were hiding him for 3 months. They were capable of hiding him for 3 months because it was 7 months after their remarriage. So we had 3 months leeway to hide him. He was 3 months old by the time he was placed in the basket. That's correct. So how do we have 3 months after his birth? It doesn't work out because he's born the 7th of Adar and he has to be floating in the basket only 3 months later. But the 21st of Nisan is not 3 months later, it's a month and a half later. Clear?
Yeah. Unless there's
So let's see.
Saving him is a different meaning.
So Gemara says, Oisa Shana that year, Muberes Oisa. It was a leap year. So you have an extra Adar now. But you still don't get exactly 3 months.
2.5 then.
Oh, so says the Gemara, Rubai Shel Rishon, you have the majority of the first month, because you have set from the 7th to the end is 23 days, the majority. You have Rubai Shel Achron, and the majority of the 3rd month, Nisan, which is 21 days. The Emtsoi, and the middle month, Shalom, is complete. So it's not exactly 3 months, right? You have 2 others.
Majority.
So it's not exactly 3 months, but you have a full month in the middle, the month of Adar 2, and you have the majority of Adar 1 from his birth date 7 to the end of the Adar, and you have the most of Nisan, majority of Nisan from the 1st of Nisan to the 21st of Nisan. So when it says that he was put into the basket in the Nile 3 months after his birth, according to this opinion, it wasn't exactly 3 months, it was approximately 3 months. Clear?
Because it could have been in his 3rd month.
Sorry?
It could have been in his 3rd month.
Right, but it couldn't have been like too early, like it could have been like just 2 months of the first month, and 2 days of the first month and then 2 days of the last month. Because the logic here is that the parents were capable of hiding Moshe Rabbeinu for 3 months because it was only 7 months after their remarriage, right? That was the point. So if you only gave it, let's say, a month and 5 days, it wouldn't work out. But because it's almost 3 months, it makes sense. They were worried about hiding him. They didn't wait till exactly the 9th month. A little earlier, they started hiding him, started putting him in the basket because they were worried any day the Pharaoh would show up to take him.
And it's been proven that year there was a leap year.
I don't know if it's been proven, but according to this opinion, it was a leap year. But I want to make it clear, there's very simple logic here. Even though we said that it was 3 months after he was born that he was put in the basket, but why did they wait 3 months? Why did they wait 3 months after he was born to put him in the basket?
Because they could.
Because they were able to hide him for 3 months.
Yeah.
Because the Egyptians weren't expecting to see a baby yet. So does that mean they waited to the exact month, not the exact month on the day?
Right.
It's very logical that a week earlier they said, okay, any day now the Egyptians are showing up, let's put him in the basket. So as long as it's
So you would get that extra. day
exactly,
That was missing from the 3-month period.
exactly my point. It doesn't have to be exactly 3 months to the day. It's an estimate, almost 3 months, and the logic will still
But
stand.
the logic says it wouldn't be exactly 3 months.
Exactly. So even though according to the first opinion, you get almost exactly 3 months, 7th of Adar, 7th of Nisan, 7th of Iyar, to the 6th of Sivan. So it's 1 day before 9 months.
Yeah.
Over here, you get 2 weeks before 9 months. And it would still make sense. Because any day now, the Egyptians are going to show up.
Right.
Not that they have to wait exactly to the 9-month day, right? Exactly the 9th month in the day. I hope that was clear.
Yeah.
Sorry? Is that clear, Alan?
Very, very clear.
I mean, the other opinion works out more.
The other opinion works out more perfectly, mathematically perfect, almost perfectly.
Almost.
It's 3 months minus 1 day. But even, as I'm saying, even according to the other opinion, where it's not exactly 3 months, it still makes sense that sometime before they're, you don't wait for the last second to save your child, right? There's a risk here. So you know that the Egyptians might show up any day. So you put them in the basket earlier. It still follows. That's my suggested understanding of this.
Yeah, that logic would say that
Yeah.
parents would act earlier.
That's right.
Same with your boys. You know, they're 3 months old
Yeah.
from the beginning of the 3 months to the end of the 3 months. Anywhere in between, they're 3 months old.
Yeah, that's right. Use the term 3 months old even before someone's 3 months. Yeah. Or no, you say it's in the 3rd month. Anyway,
But yeah, some countries, if it's a certain age.
it's a question of semantics anyway. It's not. That's a question of semantics. It's a question of semantics, not a question of.
Because you're in that year.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's stop over here because the Gemara is going to get into another discussion, which I'd like to elaborate on tomorrow. The Gemara is going to talk about Moshe Rabbeinu being nursed, and I want to emphasize it tomorrow because the Rebbe would highlight this idea when it came to we learned about the Rebbe's 10 mitzvah campaigns last Shabbos, 2 Shabbos ago, and one of the campaigns is the campaign of kosher, and I want to talk about that a little bit related to tomorrow's Gemara.
Beautiful.
It'll be a nice event,
On
yeah.
Sunday, we listened to the Rabbi's video.
Yeah.
Living Torah, and he advocated so.
Okay. Have a wonderful day.
On kids going to camp.
Yeah.
I heard though today the camps are from Christian people that I know. That the camps though they're not really teaching Torah that much. They're just sort of babysitting the kids.
Depends where.
True, is that?
Depends where. The camp I went to learned Torah.
Or when you went.
Still today, my kids are going to go to do the same.
Oh yeah.
Chabad camps absolutely teach Torah.
Which camps?
Gan Yisrael. Same camp that you learned about in the video.
God in Israel.
Gan Israel, still operation, still teaching Torah. But I want to explain something about the camps. The point is, it's not just a question of how many hours you learn Torah. The point is it's 24/7, you're in the environment of Torah. So even when you're learning sport, even when you're playing sports,
No, for
it's a
sure.
Torah environment. That's the point.
It was just more like
It's not about how many.
babysitting kind of thing.
No, not when I went to camp. Not the camp my kids go.
Kids now.
In Gan Yisrael, absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Gan Yisrael.
Because I was pretty.
Absolutely not.
disheartened by that.
No. God forbid. Gan Yisrael is absolutely not a babysitter service. You learn much more in camp in the less hours of Torah learning you do in school. With less hours of Torah learning in camp, you learn more than you do in school because of the environment. You know, 24/7 environment where the whole environment is in Montreal and New York and parks all over. In Italy and Toronto, there's one. All over. Gan Yisrael is a network of camps all over the world. In Australia,
Your kids go to the ones here in Montreal.
my kids aren't old enough to go to overnight camp. My oldest is not old enough.
Camps, right?
There's day camps also. Day camps definitely not babysitting service. My kids also learned. But the point of the camp is not the amount of hours you're learning. The point of the camp is an environment in which everything about it is the environment you soak up Judaism. It's a whole different story. Certainly, I did as a kid, and as a staff member in camp, also the same thing. I say Gan Yisrael's babysitting service, God forbid. It's a beautiful and wholesome environment that I wish upon all Jewish children.
I was just talking to.
It's an environment that I wish upon all Jewish children. Yeah.
The way the Rabbi was advocating for that.
Yeah.
It's very touching.
What do you say, Alan?
I was just talking to. And I was in the mikveh yesterday morning, and I was talking to the son of Alex, across the road, the rabbi.
Uh-huh.
He's the rabbi of the Adaf.
Yeah. Is it
So his son was telling me that he was going to Mexico for 3 months.
to do a camp?
Yeah, in a camp. He says everything is. He says it's constant because we're all the same. We're all brought up the same. We talk religion. We talk this. We talk sports. We talk religion. But it always comes back to religion.
Staff member also. I was a staff member in Israel number of years in New York and in Australia and other places. And when you're living with them, when you're living with children, living together, right? You're living together for 2 months or a month, whatever it is, and you have conversations at random times on a hike somewhere. You can have much more influence in the child's thinking and education than when the kid sits in a classroom staring at a board, waiting for a teacher to write something down that he's not interested in, so he blocks his brain out half the time. But when you're taking a hike and you're having a good time, and you have a conversation about life, the idea of Torah comes up. The conversation teaches more.
It's interesting. It gets very interesting.
Than any classroom ever. I know this from being both a camper and being a counselor. I know this from both of my experiences. And the Gan Yisrael network is massive. It's all over the world.
I wish I can go to a camp like that.
You know what we do?
Hey,
That's why they go for Shabbos loyal.
If kids can't afford
Shabbos, the closest thing you get to what
that's
when I
excellent.
got to camp as a kid is Shabbos oil.
Yeah,
How much
that's
learning
excellent.
putting on at Shabbos oil? 2 hours, 3 hours. But not the learning. It's the environment of living and breathing Yiddishkeit for 24 hours and living
That's right.
in the proximity.
It's
proximity of the
It's
Rebbe.
just amazing. It's just amazing.
That's kind of what camp is like. It's like being 2 months Shabbos oil. That's what it's like. Where everything you're doing, sports, dinners, meals, it's all elevator on a whole nother level. And that was my experience with the staff member as a child.
How are sports integrated in that idea of
It's just saying it's not about saying anything or doing anything. It's just the whole, it's just you soak it in. It's just all there because everything's in that context. Everything's in that context. Because everything is in the context. There's no division. When you say one God, talked about earlier, one God means that everything is. When I work out, it's also God. When you play sports, it's also God. Because there's only one God, not two gods. God when I learn and the God when I sports, I put God on hold.
stand during competition?
It's the same. Missing the point here. It's not about what you do or don't do. It's not about it's not about even if you don't do anything. Even if the game goes perfect, no one loses the out, no yarmulke falls off, no one hurts themselves. You're just playing a regular plain old sports game. But when you're playing getting on Yisrael, it's a different game. Just because everything is Yiddishkeit. All of it is one. You're just living in a bubble of Judaism. You're eating challah at the oil for Shabbos. It's different than the challah you eat at home on Tuesday. It's not a different challah, but it's a whole different challah. Just because it's a transcendent experience. It's a wholesome experience that overtakes all of it. Because it's just all within the framework of soaking in Hashem and His Torah. So even when you're not technically learning, it's still godly. It's hard to explain it. The best example is when you're sitting around and having just a conversation with a friend and drinking coffee Shabbos morning at the oil. It's a different experience because you're in that environment, because you're inside this bubble of wholesomeness, this bubble of holiness.
It's like when you have a Shabbos meal on Shabbos, and then you have the same.
Exactly. Same meal on Shabbos, same meal during the week. Same conversation on Shabbos, same meal during the week. But it's a whole different story. Whole different story on Shabbos.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right.
It's just amazing how you get. It's a bubble. You get into that bubble.
Yep.
And it's a beautiful experience. I remember when I was a kid, my parents sent me to a camp in Prefontaine. It's called Unzer Camp.
Okay.
And it was a Jewish camp, and I still sing songs, Jewish Yiddish songs that they taught me, or Hebrew songs that they taught me. I still hum them.
It's beautiful.
It was an amazing experience.
So with in Gan Yisrael, you get that with Torah.
Yeah.
You soak it all in.
Yeah, it was amazing, and there wasn't Torah in those days. It was just Torah like, but it's. If I could redo it again, I'd do it.
Every camp has their own individual website. You can go check Google, check on Yisrael. Okay, have a wonderful day, everybody, and Chassidim would wish a good Yom Tov today. Yom Tov of your base Talmud, the previous Rebbe's liberation and the liberation of all Yidden, as you learned in Hayom Yom today.
No talking.
Yeah, no talking today for Chabad. That's right.
Yay.
Okay, wonderful day.
Bye.
Yom Tov.